Have you ever awakened from a dream only to discover it wouldn't leave you? Not because it frightened you, but because it felt more real than reality itself. Some dreams disappear before breakfast. Others change the course of a lifetime. For Clarissa, this was becoming one of those dreams. Morning sunlight slipped quietly through her bedroom curtains. The room looked exactly as it had the night before. The same books, the same backpack, the same unfinished worries waiting for another day. But something inside her had changed. She sat on the edge of her bed, not thinking about school, not thinking about homework. She was thinking about wildflowers in a voice she couldn't forget. There is always hope. Heal and be healed. She whispered those words again, almost afraid they would disappear. Who was that young woman? Why did she feel so familiar? Why did every conversation with her seem more peaceful than anything Clarissa experienced while awake? She didn't have answers, only questions. Yet somehow, those questions no longer frightened her. Because for the first time in weeks, hope had quietly entered the room. Far beyond what human eyes could see, Grace stood nearby, watching, waiting, praying. Guardian angels never force themselves into our lives. They don't shout over our fears. They gently point us toward truth. Grace knew Clarissa wasn't ready to understand everything. If heaven had revealed too much, the young girl might have rejected it altogether. God often reveals truth, one step at a time, one lesson, one moment, one quiet whisper after another. Because faith grows the same way a seed grows, slowly, patiently, almost invisibly. Perhaps you've experienced seasons like that, moments when God seemed to reveal only enough light for your very next step. Not the whole journey, just enough to keep walking. That's because God rarely gives us the entire map. He gives us Himself. And somehow, that's always enough. Today's journey would test whether Clarissa was ready to trust that unseen guidance. Not every battle is visible. Some of the fiercest wars take place inside our thoughts. People may see your smile while never realizing your mind has been fighting all day. Clarissa understood that battle. She wanted to do better. She really did. She promised herself every morning, this time, I'll stay calm. I'll focus. I won't lose control. Yet somehow, before the day was over, everything seemed to fall apart again. Have you ever wondered why we sometimes become the very person we're trying not to be? The Apostle Paul understood that struggle. He wrote, "For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing." Even great men of faith understood inner conflict. Clarissa walked through the school doors. Students laughed. Friends gathered around lockers. Teachers welcomed another day. Everything appeared normal. But inside, the same questions returned. Why can't I think clearly? Why do I keep disappointing everyone? Why does no one understand what I'm trying to say? The enemy loves unanswered questions, because unanswered questions often become lies. Silently, Clarissa thought to herself, if nobody understands me, maybe nobody cares. If I keep failing, maybe I'll never change. Grace immediately recognized those thoughts. They did not come from God because they carried none of God's character. God corrects. He never condemns. God convicts. He never crushes. God restores. He never tells His children they're beyond hope. Grace quietly surrounded Clarissa with heaven's peace, not removing every difficult thought, but strengthening her heart to resist believing them. Sometimes that's how God answers our prayers, not by removing the storm, but by strengthening us to walk through it. Meanwhile, something else was happening. Without anyone realizing it, events were quietly unfolding that would soon force the Adams family to confront wounds they had buried for years. Grace sensed it. Heaven had begun moving. And when God begins arranging restoration, every conversation, every delay, every unexpected encounter can become part of his plan. There are moments in life when one encouraging voice can drown out 100 voices of doubt. Most people never realize how powerful a single conversation can become. For Clarissa, that conversation came from someone who simply refused to stop believing in her. As classes changed, students filled the hallways with laughter and conversation. Clarissa walked quietly. She still carried the weight of the morning. The dream lingered in her thoughts. So did the questions. She wondered if anyone could really understand what she was experiencing. Then she heard a familiar voice. "Hey, Clary." It was Kevin. He noticed immediately that something wasn't right. "You've been somewhere else all day." Clarissa smiled faintly. "I guess I have." Kevin leaned against a locker. "You don't have to tell me everything, but don't convince yourself you're carrying this alone." Those simple words landed differently this time. Clarissa wasn't used to hearing reassurance. She had grown accustomed to correction, advice, expectations, but Kevin offered something else: presence. Sometimes the greatest gift you can give another person isn't an answer. It's simply letting them know they don't have to face life alone. Grace watched the exchange quietly. She smiled, not because Kevin knew everything. He didn't. But because God often uses ordinary people to accomplish extraordinary things. A kind word, a listening ear, a patient heart. These are often heaven's favorite tools. The Apostle Paul encouraged believers to encourage one another and build each other up. Notice, he didn't say, fix one another. He said, build one another. There's a difference. Some people try to change us. Others help us discover who God created us to become. Kevin was becoming that kind of friend. Without realizing it, he was helping Grace fulfill heaven's assignment. Clarissa walked away from that conversation feeling lighter. Her problems hadn't disappeared. School hadn't suddenly become easier. Her family hadn't changed overnight. But hope had grown just a little stronger. Sometimes that's enough to keep us moving forward, because hope is where healing begins. Yet while hope was quietly growing, another storm was already forming. And this one would reach much deeper than Clarissa ever imagined. Not every wound leaves a scar that others can see. Some injuries happen so early in life, we forget where they came from. We simply learn to live with them. Grace understood that, which is why her attention slowly turned away from Clarissa and toward Tess. If this family was ever going to heal, someone had to understand where the pain began. Grace looked beyond the present into memories long buried. She saw Tess as a little girl, quiet, lonely, standing beside a window, waiting for parents who would never come home again. In one tragic accident, Tess lost both her mother and father. Childhood changed forever. She was raised by relatives who provided food, clothes, and discipline. But affection was often missing. Words of encouragement were rare. Mistakes were remembered. Success became the only safe place to hide. As Tess grew older, she discovered something. If she worked harder than everyone else, people noticed. If she earned perfect grades, people praised her. Achievement became protection. Perfection became survival. Grace watched those memories with compassion. No child chooses those lessons. Life teaches them, sometimes harshly, sometimes unfairly. Without realizing it, Tess carried those wounds into adulthood. She became an excellent educator, a devoted wife, a loving mother. But fear quietly followed her. She feared failure. She feared disappointment. Most of all, she feared losing Clarissa. So every correction, every lecture, every high expectation was rooted, not in anger, but in fear. Clarissa couldn't see that. She only heard criticism. How many families struggle with the same misunderstanding? One person speaks from fear, another hears rejection. Both walk away wounded. Neither intended to hurt the other. The Bible reminds us, perfect love casts out fear. 1 John 4:18. Fear controls, love restores. Fear demands perfection. Love offers grace. Grace realized that before Clarissa's heart could fully heal, Tess's heart would have to experience God's healing too. Because healing doesn't simply move forward. Sometimes it reaches backward to restore what was broken long ago. As evening settled over the Adams home, everyone appeared to be living an ordinary day. Caleb read quietly. Tess prepared tomorrow's work. Clarissa finished homework. But heaven saw something different. God had begun restoring 3 hearts at once. None of them knew it. Yet every prayer, every conversation, every dream was slowly leading this family toward redemption. Sometimes, God allows us to reach the end of ourselves before He shows us the beginning of His plan. For Clarissa, that day had arrived. She tried, she really did. She completed her assignments. She stayed quiet in class. She even smiled when her friends encouraged her. But no matter what she did, she still felt like she was failing. Not only at school, but at life. During the math test today, she couldn't concentrate, so she knows she failed. Everywhere she turned, someone expected more. Teachers wanted better grades. Her mother demanded responsibility. Even she expected more from herself. The pressure became unbearable. As the final school bell rang, Clarissa didn't head toward the bus. She walked, without really knowing where she was going, past the football field, past the parking lot, past the edge of campus. She finally sat beneath an old oak tree, alone. For the first time all day, the tears came. She wasn't crying because of school. She wasn't crying because of her parents. She cried because she no longer recognized herself. Looking toward heaven, she whispered, "God, if you're really there, please help me." It wasn't an eloquent prayer. It wasn't polished. It was simply honest. And heaven always hears an honest heart. Grace stood beside her, unable to answer aloud, yet filled with joy, because for the first time, Clarissa wasn't asking people for answers. She was asking God. Sometimes our breakthrough begins with one desperate prayer. Prayer changes more than circumstances. It changes us. Clarissa didn't notice anything miraculous that afternoon. No thunder, no bright light, no booming voice from heaven. Instead, she experienced something unexpected. Peace, just enough peace to stand back up. Just enough hope to believe tomorrow might be different. Sometimes that's exactly how God works. The storm is still there, but suddenly you're no longer facing it alone. Grace smiled. Clarissa had finally opened the door. Not completely, but enough. enough for heaven to begin working in ways she couldn't yet imagine. Meanwhile, at home, another battle was unfolding. Tess sat quietly at the kitchen table. The house was unusually silent. For the first time in weeks, she asked herself a difficult question. What if I've been trying to fix my daughter instead of understanding her? The thought unsettled her. She remembered her own childhood, the fear, the criticism, the loneliness. Was she repeating the very pattern she had promised herself would end? Upstairs, Caleb paused outside Clarissa's bedroom. He raised his hand to knock, then lowered it again. He wanted to say something, anything, but like so many fathers, he didn't know where to begin. Grace looked at all three of them. Three good people, three wounded hearts, one family, slowly drifting apart. Yet heaven wasn't discouraged, because God specializes in restoring broken families. The psalmist wrote, "He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds." Not some wounds, all wounds. And that healing had finally begun. But neither Clarissa nor her parents realized that the greatest test was still ahead. One unexpected event would force every member of the Addams family to choose between fear and faith. And Grace knew the moment she had been preparing for was rapidly approaching. Sometimes the answers we're looking for are hidden beneath the things we cannot see. Clarissa's story is far from over, and the questions surrounding her situation are only beginning to unfold. What happens next may change everything. Will Grace finally understand what Clarissa is going through? Will the family find the answers they desperately need? And where will faith lead them when the answers don't come easily? Join us in episode 3 of A Challenge to Grace, because the story is not over. If this story touched your heart, tell me in the comments. I know I'm not alone. And if you believe God is still working behind the scenes in your life, share this video with someone who needs that reminder today. Subscribe to Renewed Mind 369 for more inspirational stories, prayers, and messages of faith. And remember, you may not see heaven working, but that doesn't mean heaven isn't working.